Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. This is one of my heroes in life. I have known him almost all of my 45 years. When my family moved to Ponchatoula's 7th Street location right by Memorial Park, where they do the Strawberry Festival, we were blessed to move in next door to the Neill family. And the patriarch of that family, Abner Neill Jr., Uncle Abner to me, Pawpaw to many of you, if you've taken his driver's ed class, is just one of the nicest and best men I've ever known. He is a Christian who walks the walk and talks the talk, and he's a great family man. He's a businessman, a mentor. I would be here all afternoon, all evening with accolades, if I just told you what he was. But a better idea would probably be to show you by bringing him on. So with no further ado, Abner Neill, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Parker. It's an honor to be here today.
Well, the feeling is mutual, and I'm really honored that you would share your valuable time with us. Why don't we kick things off with you telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I'll start real quick. I was born in Texarkana, Arkansas. I was born there 78 years ago. The reason it was in Arkansas was because Texarkana is divided. Part of it's in Arkansas, part of it's in Texas, but the Better Hospital was in Arkansas. So I was born there, went to Shreveport. At age 11, we moved to Baton Rouge. My father was in the wholesale beauty business, and they bought out a company in Baton Rouge. I lived there until, I'm confused now, but anyhow. So that's where I was, and then I ended up moving to Oklahoma. I left the family beauty business and went to Oklahoma I thought to become a car dealer. My father-in-law was a car dealer, and 6 years later, I found out that wasn't the case, but my parents came up and visited. My dad said that he was doing real estate. Why not come back down to Louisiana? And my wife and I talked about it. And we moved down here to take care of them. That was in 1972. It's amazing. I've lived here for 44 years now.
So you came back with something better than a car dealership. You came back with Sharon Neill. And I can't wait. I'm going to ask you about that love story because, as you know, as much as I love you, if there's anybody I love more, it's your beautiful wife, Sharon. But before I get into that stage of life, let's talk a little bit about your parents, because they are really well known, well respected, wonderful folks that we all miss dearly. And you mentioned the business they started. I mean, Neill Corp's grown into one of the biggest and best businesses around, but it all started with Abner Neill Sr., right? And so if you would tell us about your parents, their business, and the wonderful life that they created for you and your brother and the family that's here now.
Well, here's how it worked. My father was a partner with two other men in Shreveport. And when we moved to Baton Rouge, we were running it was called Magnolia Beauty Supply. And by that time, my brother had graduated he didn't graduate, but left college and was working in the beauty business, and I was too. And so we encouraged him to break away. So we made an agreement that we would not go north into Alexandria, and they wouldn't come south until we got established. And so it was originally Neill's Professional Beauty Supply, and mother and dad and my brother Edwin, who is deceased, and myself were in the business. Ultimately, Edwin and I wanted to be partners in the business, so we asked that to happen, and we did become partners. And then, as I said, my father-in-law made some mention of the car business, and if I made a decision with Edwin, excuse my scratching, but if I made a decision with Edwin, it was the boys were picking on Dad, and Dad's not there. So I decided, well, I'll get out of the picture. I mean, I can sell. I'll just go there, and so that's why I sold my interest out to Edwin. The business was Edwin was a pioneer, and he took his ideas and grew Neill Corp, or now it's known as Neill's, or Neill, to a fantastically gigantic business. He had a brilliant mind.
He really was brilliant. I remember my dad telling me, as you know, my family was in the bottling business once upon a time, and Ponchatoula Bottling Company, their business bottled knee-high beverage and RC Cola here in Ponchatoula. But Dad always talks about your brother Edwin coming to him with the wild idea, must have been the 70s, of bottling water.
Yep.
And Dad was like, Edwin, who would pay for bottled water? He was just right about a multi-billion-dollar idea, but he was decades ahead of his time. But what a wonderful family you come from. I loved your mother. She was a sweetheart. Tell us what it was like growing up in their household. You know, what were they like as parents?
Well, it was really, Dad was a very passive guy. But once you boxed him into a corner, he was not real passive. Mother was always, let me focus on them.
Yeah, please.
They ran away and got married back in high school. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And they were inseparable. And that was the thing people in Ponchatoula saw. When you saw Abner Neill, you saw Harriet Neill. They just loved each other and were really just great parents. A great example of how to love your mate. To that note, let me make a comment about that, and that was that my dad would never mind. I was going to say something, and I'll pass on that.
Yeah, well, take your time, and we can circle back if you want, or move on. If you don't mind, I do want to share a comment that's been posted here. Miss Kathy Darr says that you are a great man of God and you have a beautiful wife and family. Kathy, I want to thank you for sharing that, because of course I agree 100%. I couldn't have said it better. And I want to thank you for sharing that comment, and also let anyone else know who might be watching live that we have the ability to share your comment with Abner. So if you want to say something nice, as Kathy's done, or if you want to pick his brain or ask him a question, knowing him as well as I do, I know that he's, he's generous with his wisdom. So feel free to drop us a comment here, whether you just want to say hi or, you want to participate beyond that. But Kathy, thank you for sharing that with us. And I know it probably touches you, Uncle Abner, to hear that from
Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. That's an honor. I do want to tell one real quick story. My mother was
please go for it.
My mother was very opinionated, and once my dad passed away, I would go over and we would play cards, we'd play poker, and I would say, this is the championship of Louisiana, and I had a title for everything, whatever. We would be having adult beverages, and I would say, Mom, you're so opinionated. Well, I'm opinionated now too, so I inherited that from her. But the thing I really want to share.
I'm glad you said it, so I didn't have to.
Well, I want to share this story, then we'll move on. But one evening, Glenn Fendelson and I went over, we were playing cards and we were having an adult beverage. And Mother used to make homemade fudge with chocolate and sugar and vanilla and butter and all this stuff. And at that time, that was before Glenn had his stomach surgery. And he said, Miss Harriet, would you make me some of that fudge? She said, well, hell no, Glenn, you're too fat. Glenn was not insulted, but that's how straightforward my mother would be.
Yes, she was a blunt woman, yeah.
And whenever they get a new pastor or a minister, rather, at the First Methodist where she attended worship, she would tell him about her martini. She wasn't going to give up her martini. So she let him know up front. So I just thought that was kind of funny. That was her personality.
So she blessed you with Christian values and candor and a healthy supply of opinions. That's
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, what about your father? You mentioned him being passive. Clearly, you guys were close. You went into business together.
Right.
You had wonderful mentors in your parents. You told us a real cute, fun story about your mom. But what do you remember about your dad that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess the thing to share about Dad was he was a hardworking man. When we lived in Shreveport, he would leave on Monday morning and come back on Friday evening from selling beauty products, and so he just was a good guy. I mean, I don't have any humor thing. I mean, I could tell you the time that.
Hey, it's tough to top that Glenn Fendelson fudge story. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Dad didn't have quite the straightforwardness his mother did, but anyhow, he and I, when we lived in Baton Rouge, we bowled on the same bowling team. That was some time we got to spend together.
Oh, that's neat.
And so forth. But he just, as I said, his dedication to his family and his love for Mother, they were incredible dancers. Just like Dan Durham was. I mean, I went someplace and the people of their generation, I mean, it was like silk when they danced. It was beautiful. So,
Yeah, they came up watching Fred Astaire and all the great legends of old.
yes.
They definitely had a different skill set. My parents are great dancers, and none of us can we're all born with two left feet. But it's neat to see that. Well, tell us, if you will, what it was like coming to Ponchatoula from Shreveport, Texarkana. I mean, what do you recall what was your impression of this area after leaving those places?
Well, here's what when we decided to move from Oklahoma, education was the most important thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, at that time, found that the Ponchatoula school system was the best. Mother and dad at that time lived in Hammond.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came and looked, and we bought the Ward sisters' house on 8th Street, right across from St. Joseph's. And the people of Ponchatoula welcomed us with open arms, and we just fell in love with Ponchatoula. And at that time, I was a part of the Rotary Club. I was at Rotary in Moore, Oklahoma. At the time, I became the youngest president of the Moore Club. And so I came here and I encouraged Dad to get involved in Rotary, which he ultimately did do. But, speaking of Ponchatoula, so anyhow, rocking along.
Uncle Abner, may I interrupt you? Does this Rotary letter opener look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
I want to thank you. I think you gave that to me when I became Rotary president, and I've been very grateful for it. I keep it right here on my desk. But please continue. I hate to interrupt your story, but I do want to show you.
You're fine. But as I said, I tried the real estate business, was not successful. I mean, one thing I did find that you had to be from this area to be successful in the real estate business, at least in that time.
Well, your timing had to be tough too. I mean, aren't you talking about a time period with crazy high interest rates?
Oh, absolutely.
Inflation? I'm sure people nowadays can relate to that, but it's not
like
the market
12%.
of the last few years. It's the market of today, or worse that you walked into. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So anyhow, long story short, I decided I would go back in the automobile business, and I went to work for Ross Downing, and I was there my first week, and I got a phone call from an individual wanting to meet with me about getting in the insurance business, doing payroll marketing for a company called Colonial Life and Accident. They were starting a new division. They wanted to deal with small businesses, mom and pop operations. And so I said, well, I'm not interested in insurance, but if you're going to buy me a free lunch, I'll meet. Well, I changed my mind and ended up going in the insurance business in 1979, doing payroll marketing, and did that for 20 years. And then ultimately decided to go a different direction in the insurance business. But, that was where I started from, and was blessed that he gave me a lot of flexibility. I got to spend a lot of time with, especially with Shelby, my granddaughter.
Well, I'm going to ask you a lot about your family in a bit, but if you don't mind, let's take a trip back. Okay. And let's start this superhero origin story, if you will, in its proper place, with telling us about how you met Aunt Sharon and how your family came together. Because as I understand it, you're in your 58th year of marriage. Absolutely. And I want to ask about that. I definitely want some advice on how to make that happen, because you got me whipped by about 48 years on that front. But how did you meet Sharon?
Okay, here's the story. I was in Northeast, now known as ULM, and I was in
in Monroe, right?
In Monroe, correct. Okay. And my suite mate was on the phone. I said, "Who are you talking to?" And he said, "I'm talking to," I remember her name, but her last name was Alvis. And he said, we're gonna go swimming in the Washita River. I said, "Well, she got a friend?" And he said, "Well, yeah, she's got a sister." I said, "Well, I want to go too." So we had his date in the car, and we went to Sharon's house to pick up my date. And Sharon came out of the house in a very pretty two-piece black terry cloth bathing suit. And she was very shapely and attractive at that time. Of course, we're 58 years back. But anyhow, and I introduced myself. The girl, my date, got in the car, and we left, and we were going toward the river. And I said, there's a bayou right across from that girl's house. Why don't we go back and swim there, because the river is kind of up. So we turned around and we pulled back up in the driveway, and Sharon comes out of the house again, bouncing down the 3 stairs, and comes to the car and said, "What did y'all forget?" I said, "You."
I love it. I love it. So how did that go over with your date? Like, you got to tell us the rest of that story.
Well, I'm going to, but she'll be embarrassed, but I'm going to tell you the story. Well, I was in a fraternity, or pledging a fraternity called Kappa Alpha. And back in those days at 18, you could drink. And we were going to have a party up in Sterlington, which is about, 15, 20 miles north of Monroe. And so when we went back, we went across the bayou to swim the bayou. Well, Sharon didn't swim, but when we got through and dropped off the Alvis girls and I got back to the dorm, I called a girl that I knew and asked her, was she dating anybody serious or whatever? She said, no. I said, well, I'm going to ask her out to the party. So I did call her a day or two later and invite her, and she said, oh yeah, I'll go. So I went to the party and drank too much beer and decided I was going to show off. There was a body of water I'd never been in, and I backed off to this barbed wire fence and ran and dove, and God saved me from any dastardly thing, because it could have been 3 inches deep or 30 feet deep.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And so once I successfully made that, I'm going to do it again. I said, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. Well, anyhow, when the party is over, this shows you how silly Sharon was. Whichever direction I turned, I borrowed a friend's car, my best friend's car. And she said, you're going the wrong way. I said, oh, no, I'm not. It ended up going into dead ending into a cornfield. And I drove out of the cornfield, made a U-turn, and God got us successfully back to Monroe. But that was our first date. And the fact that
she fell for this wild man who's driving in and driving through cornfields. So that's an interesting story. That's quite a start.
Yeah, well, that opening line, did you forget you? I mean, that's something young men need to remember so that they can use that. It worked well for me.
Absolutely. No, it's proof of the power of first impressions. Well, it's kind of funny. We were at my mom and dad's house yesterday, and they were visited by friends who were in from out of town. And the man had his new wife. They were newlyweds. And so anyway, that prompted the story of my mom and dad and how they met and were married within, I think, 3 months or something. So it's so neat to hear all these stories, because so many of us come along and, think about how many students of your driver's ed class met you as Pawpaw. And that sounds like a different person in a different world than the young man you just described. So that's neat to hear. Well, I love Aunt Sharon. She's a wonderful woman. But for folks that have not met her or don't know her, why don't you give us a little description of what she's like as a person? Because you guys have been together 58 years. You've raised 2 wonderful children, and now you've got all these beautiful grandchildren like Shelby, who you mentioned, and others. But, tell us about your wife and kind of, the journey y'all have been on for 58 years and kind of who she is.
Well, when we gave our wedding vows to each other, or said them, I should say, we agreed that we would go through thick or through thin. And so we've been blessed. Speaking of Sharon, she's the most generous, most kind person I know. She used to be a great cook, a great chef.
Absolutely. I can attest to that. The coconut cake. Oh, wow. And much more.
But she's so genuinely concerned about so many people. She worries about people all the time. She's a great Christian. I'm thrilled that she's now back in church with me and attending church. But I never worried for the years that she didn't attend. Part of the reason she didn't attend was that, as you can tell, I love people, and I'm like a butterfly at church. I greet people, and I do whatever I can do. And I was an usher at the time, and I was constantly moving. And so she just didn't particularly like the fact that I was leaving her alone. And so during that time,
I can relate as the son of a politician. Dad always had to shake every hand in the room wherever we would go. And if you're an introvert like I am, and Aunt Sharon wouldn't want to be alone in the row. I get it. That makes sense.
Right. But so now she's in church. She loves it, and the people that we attend worship with love her. But I never ever her Christianity was never down. But she's just a really wonderful person that just pours her heart out to people. I mean, she just she's made me. I've been so blessed. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And, I told you I would tell you that what I told my students, and I am honored that I for 5 years was a driving instructor and loved every minute of it, because I think that you see as you drive that so many people don't drive very well. And I'm from the old school, the blinkers, courtesy, whatever. And I would tell my students,
you're talking to a personal injury lawyer, okay? We get over 100 cases a year because people around here are bad drivers and they wreck into my poor clients. So I get it.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, because someone would, I'd be trying to counsel them about, I think that you need to find something you're going to enjoy doing, basically, probably for the rest of your life, although you can change jobs or locations. But you need to, do that. And part of it will become into counseling about and I would tell them the way that I've been married is for 55 years or 54, whatever, is that I always love Sharon, but I don't always like Sharon. And if you can differentiate from that, then you can always stay married, because you're not always going to please your mate, and you're not always going to be pleased. Okay.
Right. And you're not always going to be likable. I don't think anybody can do that. I haven't done that for 10 years with my wife. And, my dad and mom just hit the 50-year mark, and you got to get through those valleys when you're less likable than you'd like to be. Right.
Absolutely.
That's great advice.
I do want to tell one. I'm sorry.
Please do. Go ahead.
I wanted to tell a story. I was blessed in the insurance business to win numerous trips. We went to Portugal, we went to Vancouver, and we went to the Bermuda and Bahamas. But we won a trip, number of trips to Hawaii. And on this particular trip, I've been watching the television. We got there the first day about how many Japanese people came there. And so we got on the elevator. Sharon's only 4'10" and a half. And we got on the elevator. And when the next time the door opened, these Japanese men got on the elevator. Sharon was taller than them. And I'm telling you, she threw those shoulders back like, I am a giant. Okay.
She had to love that. Yeah.
It was so funny, Parker.
So did Laurie want to come to the next trip so she could be tall? I can relate. As you know, I'm the short one in my family. And, I'm only about 7 inches taller than your wife. And, I used to love to go to the LeBlanc family reunions, my mom's family,
right?
Because those little Cajun folks, they had a ton of jockeys in the family. I'd go over there and feel like a giant. So I can appreciate Aunt Sharon's trip to Hawaii. Why don't you tell us, if you don't mind, a little bit about the beautiful family that you are blessed with Aunt Sharon? You've raised these wonderful kids, and Laurie and Trey, and Trey has moved off and is doing great things that I'd love to hear about. Laurie's been doing them here, but tell us about your kids, because they were like, we've always called Laurie a sister in my family. She was our babysitter, our next door neighbor, and y'all have been so great to us. But just tell the rest of the folks about them, if you don't mind.
Well, Laurie is our firstborn. Sharon and I call Laurie the Energizer Bunny. She does everything for us, for Chris, for Miss Alice.
Don't forget my dad for 20 years at the sheriff's office. Yeah. He could have never made it without.
Your dad would always just ask Laurie what the number was for people.
She was a human Rolodex.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And she can't go anywhere that she doesn't run into people that she was able to help serve with your dad in the parish when he was the sheriff. And people just fall in love with her because she's just so sweet and kind and conscientious. I mean, she is just blessed. And then, Shelby, I'm so proud of Shelby. She put herself through nursing school, and she's works with
she's a chip off the old block. I saw that when she was babysitter to my boy Luke. She, just like her mama, took such good care of him and can juggle so many things. She was a great student, obviously, active in her community, her church, etc. She was a dutiful, at that time, girlfriend. I'm glad to hear she's recently engaged, but she'd go all around watching baseball games for her boyfriend and could manage it all. And it was so reminiscent of Laurie, you know, so similar.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned, I was fixing to mention the same thing. She and Nathan have been boyfriend, girlfriend for 11 years. It started in junior high school.
Wow.
And I'm just so excited for them that it's going to, you know, they're going to be getting married. It's probably going to be not this coming May, but the following May, I think.
That's exciting. Yeah.
But I'm excited for them. But on the other side, my son, Abner, which I call Trey, because he's the third, Abner the third. And they lived in my backyard, and he went through seminary online and in Louisiana to be a Baptist pastor, you have to go to actual seminary. Mm-hmm. And they were members of the church, the Big First Baptist over in Covington. And he felt the call and he interviewed for 2 or 3 locations. But anyhow, he ended up going to Princeton, Missouri, which is the northwest corner of Missouri. And has done an incredible job. He has 5 children, 4 girls and 1 son. He's been able to actually double the attendance of the church. He's on Facebook.
Wow.
First Baptist Church of Princeton. He reestablished the Pastoral Alliance when he got there, where all the Christian churches come together. He's involved in youth camps up in there. That's Mercer County, and he's done a lot of great things. Every time I talk to him, he FaceTimes me, and he's in college. He'll graduate next May. He decided he wanted to get a degree.
Neat.
So he and my, I'm just rambling, I'm sorry, but he and my.
No, this is interesting. I didn't know that. He has so much going on. I've lost track, but that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
So they'll graduate. He and Eddie will both graduate in May.
Uh-huh.
And his oldest daughter, Emily, is away in college. She is going to be a teacher. She went to 2-year college now. She's in 4-year. She will be an English teacher. Abigail, his second oldest.
Well, you know, you will recall my mom always wanted a redheaded girl named Emily.
Yeah.
And went through, 4 boys, here we are. So when you got that redheaded Emily grandchild, thanks to Trey and his wife, that was a pretty big deal around our neighborhood. So I'm glad to hear she's doing so well. She was a sweetheart.
Right. And Abigail, when they moved to Princeton, got involved with some of the church members working on their farm, ranch, whichever you want to call it, and can do the hay balers and all that stuff. Well, anyhow, she's now in South Dakota on a beef ranch. Her job is to feed and water, I think she said 1,700 head of beef cattle.
Holy moly.
So she's moved up there. She has 2 dogs that she adopted another dog. And his name is Simeon, but she calls him Simeon. And he rides in the tractor with her, or the 4-wheeler, to go feed the cows. Then Riley is in college. That's the middle one. That's the one I told you about, checking her out on Facebook, that she sang a song.
She's a talented singer, right?
She leads worship in the church.
Oh, wow.
And then Eddie is like you. He's in criminal justice. He graduates next May. He's in the Missouri National Guard, Army National Guard. He is going to be moving, whatever you call the title, to the adjutant general, whatever it is, the legal of it. And then the caboose, which is Maggie, who just turned 19. Maggie went to trade school. She's a welder, and it's just now she's going to be an apprentice with the Boilermakers, and she'll be able to travel all over the country doing welding. So.
Wow, she'll do so well in that career. Well, I tell you what, I got to give you some credit. That's a lot of grandkids to keep track of, and you've got those important details right there. I hope they watch this interview to see how much Pawpaw Abner loves them, because that's a lot to keep track of. Right. I've got my hands full with 2 boys at 4 and 6, and I can, between soccer and ninja class and baseball or whatnot, it's tough to keep up. So I'm impressed. If you would, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to say, I want to mention Caitlin, my granddaughter from another marriage for Chris,
right,
is in nursing school in New Orleans, and so I'm very proud of her. And then Byron Charles is my grandson. I'm very proud of him. And then again, Christopher, who's the elder. So I'm honored to have them as my grandchildren as well. So I want to bring their names in. I don't want to leave them out. So
it's such a great family. You know, my mom was mentioning, I guess Byron walked by the house the other day and he waved at her, and I was like, such a nice guy. You know, when you're a teenager, it's hard to, you know, waving at old ladies who are friends of friends is not always highest on your priority list. So y'all have a good gang there, you know, all of those kids, whether they're Neils or Gideons or whatever. But tell us, if you would, like I know there's no silver bullet, purple pill, if you will, secret to parenthood, but we do need to give credit where it's due. You and Aunt Sharon, like your parents and like your daughter and son, have been exceptional at it. So if you would, for folks like me who are raising little ones or people that are thinking about doing it one day, whatever, could you give us a little bit of advice on what it takes to be a good parent, a great grandparent?
you marry a great person called Sharon.
Amen to that. Way that's a common denominator. You know, you and my dad and I, we all outkicked our coverage, right? That sure helps.
Exactly correct. That's exactly correct. You know, we definitely moved up when we get there. You know, I guess, you know, I shared earlier with the fact that I wanted to be a parent, but I only wanted 2 children. Now I wish we'd had 3, but I wanted to be responsible and make sure that I could provide for them. But it's being involved in your children's lives and taking a real interest is important to me. I see too many people that have children that I don't say they don't love them, they just don't get involved in their life enough. And I think that's why we see some of the problem areas of young people that get into problems is because there isn't a real relationship there. They can't communicate with their children or vice versa. So, I mean, my blessing was that Sharon was there because I did travel selling beauty supplies for a number of years. And when I was in the automobile business in Oklahoma, long hours and 6 days a week, you know. So I'm just, in my case, I married up and I married a great Christian lady that was and to that note, may I tell a story? Sharon tells it to everybody, but real quick, I want to back up.
Please do.
My son earlier. Sharon, when we lived in Baton Rouge, her youngest sister came to live with us. She went to LSU, but she was living with us. And Sharon had gone to lunch somewhere. Of course, I was traveling, selling beauty supplies. And Sharon had told Sally to put the kids down, Trey down for a nap. Well, when she got home, Sally said, Trey wouldn't come in. I couldn't put him down for a nap. So Sharon walked outside and said, Trey, Aunt Sally told you to come to the house and take a nap. What are you doing? He had a basketball. He was throwing it up and catching it. He said, I'm playing ball with my best friend. She said, there's nobody out there but you. He said, yeah, I throw the ball up to God, and he throws it back down.
Oh, wow.
So
wow, that's cool.
So the calling was there. He ran away from it for a number of years, but that was the calling. But that's a true story that she loved to tell people.
That is an amazing story.
All with God.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that because you know, I think you're spot on. I mean, to be a great parent, you've got to stay involved and starting first and foremost, marry well. It's a partnership, and you know that's a big deal. Let me ask you a little bit. Let me shift gears, if you don't mind, and talk career because I know you were very successful in sales, whether you were selling cars, insurance, etc. Or other aspects of your later career, you know, your retirement, 5-year stint as a driver's ed teacher. You know, but what I want to get at here is secrets of success, if you will. You know, you don't win trips all over the world, Hawaii and, you know, the Caribbean and you name it, without selling a lot of insurance, succeeding at what you do. So what do you think were some of the secrets to your success during your career?
Well, I think most importantly, I've always tried to deal with people how I want to be dealt with. Honesty, tell them exactly what the product does perform and what it's about so they understand it, create value for them and why they should consider ownership of that particular product. And as I said, basically, it's just being straightforward and honest with people. You don't have to people, I want to treat you like I want to be treated. And that's the way I always ran my business and conducting it, whether it was in payroll marketing or individual marketing of life insurance or annuities, is that,
Mhm.
let people know why it could bring value to them, and don't sell them, just let them see the value of what it can protect them for or provide to them in their retirement years. And if you treat people that way, they see that. They don't want to be sold, they want to be told.
Yeah,
And so
that's
I
a good
just think
tip.
that's the way to do it.
Hmm. Well, I know that you're so skilled at it because not just have I seen, the evidence of your success surround you, but other people that you've mentored share that with me. For example, my good friend Jeff Myers that I went to high school with, and your dear friend, when he was interviewed on our show, of course, he's been super successful as a salesman and serial entrepreneur. He and his wife Paula do great. But he was very clear about how much you helped him and mentoring him and helping him. So that begs the question, who helped mentor you when you were coming up? I mean, who were some of the guiding lights in your life, whether we're talking personally, professionally, whatever, but who are some folks when you look back on your life, you're really grateful that God placed them in your path so that they could teach you and help guide you?
Well, I would say my father, I
Hmm.
would say my brother Edwin, and I would say my father-in-law, Gene Williams. Gene Williams was very successful. Uh, when the phone rang, he answered it. He did not allow the switchboard to screen his calls. If somebody called his dealership for him, he took the phone call.
Wow.
And as a manager, he made that straightforward to me and to the other management team. If somebody calls you, answer the phone. If I can answer it, you can answer it. And again, he taught me some really good people skills of how to treat people and deal with people. As I mentioned to you earlier before we got on the air, that for years I made the excuse, like a lot of people did, I'm great at faces but bad at names. Well, as I shared with you, as a Christian, my favorite scripture is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that means learning a name. But the
Mhm.
reason people don't learn names is one, they're lazy, but two, when they meet somebody, they introduce themselves instead of letting the person introduce themselves to them, where they can learn their name and say their name again. Because, I know my name, I've been saying it for a long, long time. But, again, you have to, if you listen, you get
Right.
the name, Danny's name, you're able to then
Mhm.
repeat it and
Yeah,
remember it.
that's a great tip. Well, what do you think about the next chapter of life? You're 78 years old, but you're a young 78. What do you have planned for the years ahead? What do you think you're going to be up to?
Well, I'm going to take care of Sharon. She has some uh, short-term memory challenges, so I'm a stay-at-home hubby now. I do some insurance from home, and I am working with Ellen Hughes Funeral Services, helping people do pre-needs and explaining
Mhm.
why they should or whatever. But I don't do that at a rabbit race. I do it slowly because I do need to. I cook and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, would you mind taking a moment right now to tell us about that? Because that is such an important service for families to know about. Would you mind sharing that with us?
sure. Well, here's the situation. We're all gonna die.
Yeah.
Okay. And
It's the one
so,
certainty coming our way.
yeah, and so life insurance is great, but life insurance really is to provide money to your loved ones so that they can maintain a standard of living. But equal to that, the advantage that I found with, once I really looked into it, is that when you lose your loved one, do you want to have to go to the funeral home and make arrangements? And the problem that happens there is that, there's siblings that don't speak to each other today because one sibling made a decision that the other sibling didn't approve of. And so it takes the pressure off your loved ones, and it allows you to decide what you want done, how the service will be, whether you'll be buried, whether you'll be cremated, whether you want a visitation, whatever. But it takes the pressure off the family. And the advantage is that when you take out a policy, it's an insurance policy, you take it out today, L.N. Hughes will honor that. If it's 30 years from now when you die, they're still going to provide the service for the price that you paid.
Yeah,
So
that's a
you
deal.
get away from inflation. It doesn't, it rises,
Yeah.
it rises with the tide. So,
Especially at the rate we're seeing inflation right now. That can't be overstated as a benefit. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know you were talking about that among other things in your future, but I do think it's important to share that with folks. So you're taking care of Aunt Sharon. You're working with the funeral home. What else? What else do you see in your future?
well, I'm very involved with my church. I like
Mhm.
that. Like I tell people, I, and I want to come back to that story real quick, but I'm a big LSU fan and I keep up with all the sports and I read that stuff every day. I do want to share this story real quick because
Yeah, go for it. We've got time.
when my brother Edwin was alive, I invited him to start. He was so busy all the time, but I invited him to start playing poker. We were playing at the Strawberry Manor at the cabana at Ms. Alice's
I
cabana.
remember that. Yeah, I remember visiting the big game back there at Miss Alice
Right.
Gideon's house. Yeah, that was
Exactly. And
big
so
time.
one night we were playing and Edwin was, I mean, the great thing about that, it was one place where Edwin could just be Edwin and let his
Yeah.
hair down. And so Edwin then raised, and I said, "Don't you know anything about money management?" And everybody at the table nearly fell out of their chair because he was a billionaire and I'm still selling insurance, right?
He was only like the most successful businessman in the region of his generation. That's funny.
Exactly. Don't you think, I said,
Hey,
"Well, don't you think about anything about money management?" I
hey,
mean,
he was still your kid brother, though, right? I mean, that never changes in life.
no, he was my oldest brother, but I
Oh,
made,
I didn't know that. I always assumed that you were the oldest because you had the name. Okay, that's news to
well,
me.
that's a good story too, real quick, because you want to know about our family.
Yeah, please
My
do.
mother, my grandfather's name was Edwin Heath Neill.
Okay.
And my mother dearly loved I called him Paul, but my Paul. And so when she found out she was pregnant, she decided she was going to name him, the Christian name was going to be that. Originally, people knew my brother as Smokey until he went to some kind of mountain thing with some guru or whatever and told him that he ought to use his real name, Edwin. But he was called Smokey because during her pregnancy, she smoked so much, and my daddy said, "Harry, you're going to smoke that baby to death." So he got the nickname of Smokey.
Oh, but I never knew where that came from. And of course, his son, Edwin, was long known as Little Smoky. He and my brother went to law school together and were buddies. And
Right.
okay, I never knew the origin of that name. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. That's it.
Well, he really was a tremendous man. You know, I mean, look, there's a street name for him in Hammond. The business continues to thrive. You know, with other members of the family. It's so neat for you to share that story because Neil Corp impacts so many people in this area. And we owe you, your father, your brother, and now your nephews and whatnot, nieces and sisters-in-law, etc. But
Absolutely.
a great debt of gratitude because this is if there's ever been a great job provider for the Hammond Ponchatoula area, it's that company. So thank you for sharing that. I want to share here. Speaking of that, some interviews we have. Miss Sandy Hano Magnon here says it's a great interview, and she says thank you for the closed captionings because she's hearing impaired. Sandra, thank you for watching the show, and I know this next comment is going to make you smile. Shelby Gideon says that you are the best, and she puts a big heart there on the end of that. And you were telling their love story earlier. There's a beautiful picture of her with her now fiance. That's pretty neat to see to say that about you and Nathan, Shelby. So I don't think I've seen you in person since the big news. Congratulations. I saw the photos. They were beautiful. You're going to be such a beautiful bride. And it's we love you. You know, my boys love you. And Brandy and I send the two of you our best wishes. Well, Uncle Abner, I have kept you probably longer than I promised. So I thank you for your time. Before we go, I just want to ask if there's anything else on your mind, on your heart, anything else you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners before we go.
Well, I just want to say that I thank Ponchatoula for loving me and allowing me and my family to come here and grow here and live here. It's people used to say, "Well, I can't believe," I said, "Let me," I worked in New Orleans for a lot of years. Excuse me. And I would tell them that I loved Ponchatoula because if I couldn't find it in Ponchatoula or Hammond, I was 30 minutes away from Baton Rouge or Slidell or New Orleans if I couldn't find it. But it was such a peaceful community, and we're so blessed that we have a great place to rear children for those that are doing that. And I'm just, as I said, Ponchatoula accepted me. And, I want to say this, that I was honored to get here to know people like Lucian Ordine
Oh yeah, Uncle Pollution. What a great man he was.
and Harry McNeely
Yeah.
and Richardson. I mean, just I can't remember all the names I want to say, but I was so honored to get to meet these people that were not founding fathers, but helped make this town what it is.
But that look like Tom Brokaw says, that's the greatest generation. I mean, those were men that, many of them fought in World War II. You just had great stories, but they were great local guys that cared about this community. They came from all over, some like Ned, their families grew up near here and were kind of here forever. Others like, they came from all over, but they settled here and they made this place special. Absolutely. And you and my dad and all those guys in your generation have carried that torch. And so, right, folks in mine, Shelby, the next one, you're up next. We have a lot, of living up to do to kind of catch up with you guys. But I want to thank you for doing your part all these years and making it a special place because, 7th Street, 8th Street, that little block that we grew up on would not have been the same without you and Aunt Sharon and Laurie and Abner, always Trey to us back then. It was really special. So thank you. Anything else before we go, Uncle Abner?
Yes, I want to say how much I love your family, but I have to tell this story real quick. I think it was in 1979. I decided to go to Alabama to take over a district for colonial life and accident. I got over there, spent, I don't know, it was 14 or 18 months. I can't remember, 14 months, and business didn't turn out like I thought, and I needed to come home. But at that time, because the business didn't grow over there, your father was kind enough to go get an 18-wheeler. He borrowed it from Tucker Oil and came over with 2 men to load it. Backed that trailer down a narrow driveway, had those guys load the truck up, brought it back. I assume they had to go through the weigh station. I don't know if they had to pay anything or whatever, and parked it back at our house on 8th Street. And I will never forget what he did for me. And I just want to say thank you.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it allows me to share. We've mentioned before a lot of different careers Dad had, whether he was an insurance adjuster, a wildlife agent, a teacher, but not a lot of people know that he used to drive a big rig. He was a truck driver for my Uncle Donnie's dad's root beer operation. So that's a skill I don't possess. I can't back up a golf cart trailer, much less a big one like you mentioned. But I'm glad to hear Dad getting some props on that. But yeah, you guys were blessed to have a special friendship, and you highlight something that I'm very grateful for. I was blessed with the best daddy in the world, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for mentioning that. I could sit here and talk to you all night, but I know Aunt Sharon misses you, and my family needs me to get home and probably start helping with bedtime routines and whatnot. So with that, folks, we'll leave you. It's been great to chat with Abner Neill. He lived up to the hype, right, folks? He is certainly one of the best and brightest here in Ponchatoula. And Uncle Abner, I thank you for your time. To our viewers, I say thank you for sticking with us. We'll be back here next week. And until then, have a great one. Take care.